welcome to today's Lunch and Learn with me, Julie Cameron. I am a business and executive coach with ActionCOACH Solihull, and I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Jo Jinks from Schofield HR, who is joining us this lunchtime to give us her education, her views, her expertise. That's the word I was looking for there, Jo, on everything to do with HR. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody.
Cool.
A real pleasure to be here.
Perfect. For those people that are joining us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you may be this lunchtime, pop your details in the chat. Tell us where you are, where you're listening in for. And equally, if you have any questions for Jo, pop them in there as well so that we can, I'll ask her. So no question is daft, no comment silly, anything relating to HR. We are your women this lunchtime. Well, not me personally, but Jo is your woman. Jo is your woman, and we are here to learn. So educate us, Jo. So the question that I always ask our guests when they first come in: tell me more about you. Tell me the journey so far with Jo Jinks.
Well, so my journey so far. So I've been in HR for about 25 years now, and it's not a career that I chose for myself. I did business and finance, which had an element of HR, and which I did like, but I like to think HR chose me. And I started in HR, as I said, 25 years ago as a HR administrator, which was the best place to start, right up until where I am now, doing lots of consultancy, working with lots of lovely businesses on different HR activities.
Cool. And did you train in HR then aspect, or did you just...
I did, yeah. The HR qualification is really important as a professional HR person. But for me, I first wanted to get some experience under my belt of what HR looked like, because as in most degrees, the day-to-day activities in HR is different to what you're taught on your qualification. So I started as a HR administrator, and I think I was probably about four years into my career, and then did my CIPD. I was very lucky because I got a buy from the first year because of my degree that I'd got already. So,
okay. So if you have a degree, you get the buy for the first year kind of aspect already?
If HR or personnel, as it was in my old days, if HR is an element of what you study, some of the credits go towards your CIPD qualification. And I did my qualification at night school, which was hard work for 2 nights a week, and then studying. It's hard work, but it was worth it. And I became a chartered member quite quickly after that. It was relatively new when the chartered status came out from the CIPD. And it's something that, I maintain. I have to maintain anyway for the role that I do. But there's a lot of CPD and a lot of education along the way, because things change regularly. Yeah.
So tell me about the role that you're doing at the moment.
So at the moment, as I said, I do consultancy work, and I work alongside my colleagues and a lot of businesses of all different shapes and sizes. And we offer HR services. So HR, as you probably know, is a vast subject. There's so much involved in it. So what we deal with clients is all of those things, from whether it's a contract or a handbook, or some of the more distressed purchases. So they've got an issue and they need support. Right down to helping them write their strategy. We've worked with HR departments as well, and coached HR departments, trained managers to be HR people as part of their day job. So it's multifaceted, really.
And is that the thing that appeals to you?
I love that. I cannot see myself sitting at my desk doing the same thing day in, day out. We joke about it. My husband's an accountant, so he looks at spreadsheets all day, and that to me is the worst job in the world. My job, I don't know what my day is going to be like. I never have, working in HR. You have a plan, the phone rings as you get in, and then the whole day changes. And I love that. And I love the element of people in it as well. I love the fact that actually you can support a business and support an employee at the same time, to get a positive outcome of things. I feel HR should be about positivity, not about negativity, and it comes with negative connotations if it's done wrong in businesses.
Yeah, I must admit, it's quite, you said that, I think it's quite interesting. You know, I used to, my background's hospitality, Joe, and we used to always kind of laugh, I suppose, in certain respects, that when HR was in the building, you knew that there was a problem. It was never seen as a positive aspect.
I've been there, Julie. A long time ago, I worked for a rather large utility company in the Midlands, and we had 2 offices on the same complex. And when I walked from one office to the other, you could see the curtains twitching. I thought, oh no, Joe's coming. What does that mean?
It's quite amount of care on a person, on you, to actually go, no, it's okay. Nobody's getting sacked today, kind of thing.
It is, because I'm a lovely person, Julie, and I don't just do some, you know, horrible things. But you know, even when I work with clients who are restructuring or making redundancies, I always, in a way that is a good for people, and try as much as I can to help employees the other end of the process. So yeah, it's not very nice with people have their job, but actually if you can help them at the other end, whether it's looking at their CV for them or putting them in touch with an agency that you know, it's a good positive outcome then.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So obviously on this call today, we primarily like to support business owners and growth, etc. And so when you're starting out and you're looking at that first step to employ or even to like outsource, we always have this discussion with business owners as through ActionCOACH, you know, do you outsource, do you employ? You know, and business owners are scared where that employment aspect is. So what are the first steps that, if you're saying, no, actually, I want to employ, what's the first steps that a business owner should look at?
I mean, firstly, let me address that, that people are scared of employment. And it's because the news only report on cases where people have been awarded millions and millions of pounds. There are a lot of cases that go to tribunal that people aren't awarded that amount of money. So I think that's what prevents people or makes them nervous about employing people. But for me, the first thought when you're thinking about employing, there's 3 things to consider really. One is your compliance. So you need to issue someone with a contract as soon as they join you. So it's really important that you've got a good, solid contract in place. The other is your policies and your procedures. Your policies and procedures are there to provide employees with knowledge of what's expected of them. If you don't give them those tools, then they are going to come into your business behave in a certain way that might actually not be the way you want them to behave. But if you haven't told them that, how are they to know? And the third thing, which I think is probably even a little bit more important than the other 2, is what culture do you want of your business? What do you want your business to look and feel like to the employee? And that's the area that employers don't always look at. They think because they're so task orientated and business successful orientated, they don't think, I want to create this kind of environment that will attract people and make people engaged with me, which actually makes the HR element of employing people a lot easier.
Yeah, totally agree. We always talk about that vision, the mission, the values, and it's the values of the people that you want your business to have, but actually you want your suppliers to have the same values, you want your employees to have the same values, you want your customers to have the same values as you, so that it's an easy transaction, isn't it? It's an easy thing.
Absolutely, and those values need to be embedded in everything. It's no point in having a list of values if you're not going to recruit with those values in mind, if you're not going to manage with those values in mind, because they just become worthless really. But you know, culture, especially now in the market today, culture is one of the first things people look at when they're looking at a new employer. It's not about terms and conditions, it's about what can they offer me, what's the culture going to be like. You know, can I work from home? Can I work in the office? Do I get free tea and coffee? You know, it's all of those sort of things that people consider first before they think about the salary of a job.
Yeah, I was going to say, why wouldn't you want to work where they don't offer you free tea and coffee? Come on.
Honestly, you know. I'm sure I had to pay 5p for my tea and coffee at Severn Trent all those years ago.
Oh, really? But it is quite interesting. But it is interesting because it's about those added bonuses, those added extras that, like you said, the
It
culture
is.
of an office. Can you work at home?
Yeah.
Can you not work at home? Can you flexi time? All of those, they're really important.
They are.
It's
And if you
also,
think about the cost of living as well at the moment, you know, it's expensive to work from home. In COVID, it became necessary for people to work from home if they could. And people got used to that, and they loved the idea because it saved them on commute time, that people sold their cars, people bought puppies, and all of those things, me included, actually, in the puppy situation. But now it's more expensive to work from home than it would be to work in the office. And I'm saying to my clients, you know, if you are wanting to bring people back, the fact that they haven't got to cover their electric, their gas during the working day, that you can actually provide them tea, coffee and milk, so they haven't got to purchase that either. And then look at how you help them come back to the office. You know, it can be used to a positive advantage.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're like looking to employ, you know, like as soon as you say contract, a lot of business owners kind of go, ooh, where do I start? How do I look at that? Can you just ask Google for a contract? Or
you can ask Google for a contract, but it will probably be a load of rubbish.
Are you having palpitations that I said just ask Google?
Yeah. So, you know, Google will give you a lot of things, but what Google doesn't check is the compliance of it. So a contract has got to be specific to your business. So there are some statutory terms that the law dictates that must be in a contract of employment. So what's my holiday entitlement? What am I going to be paid? Where am I going to be based, for example? But the rest is down to the business to decide what they want to include, which is kind of like, I refer to it as a customs and practice. So how do you want your business to run? So there's a lot of thought that should go into a contract. Compliance is one, but then again, as I said earlier, it's the culture as well. So what sort of things do you want to make contractual? And business owners also have to think about, if this person leaves, what do I need to protect?
Yeah.
So what part of my business do I need to protect? And that's where we look at, you know, restricting what people can do when they leave, what information they can share, and how long that restrictions are in place for.
Do you find that there's a lot of that? I always feel that that's quite mean to put those clauses into contracts, but actually, you can come and work for me, but you can't do the same job for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
but
I mean, the key is you can't restrict someone's ability to earn a living. That's the key to it. But say a lot of sales positions, for instance, sales companies who have big sales teams want to protect their intellectual property, and they want to protect their customer listings and those sort of things. So they're quite important from that perspective, but they're not necessary in every role. You know, someone who perhaps works in retail, for instance, wouldn't have those restrictions in place because, you know, they might work for a retailer and they're going to stay in that's the industry and the job they've chosen. So you wouldn't want to prevent them looking in other retail outlets to be able to work. So it would be less necessary.
I get you. So obviously there's the contract and the compliance policies and procedures. It seems like a lot to kind of think about when you're first employing somebody. But is it quite straightforward? We want to scare anybody?
No, it's not scary. It's really straightforward. You can use organisations like ours, obviously, but the policies and procedures, there's a few that you would definitely need to have. So from that, you'd need your health and safety policies, because you've got to protect your employees and yourself and your premises. You need policies that are statutory requirements, so disciplinary, grievance, things to do with equality and diversity. You would definitely need to have in place how you're going to pay people. But, you know, previously I've seen handbooks that have been hundreds of pages long. They don't have to be. You could write your policies on a sheet of paper. This is what's expected. This is what the law says, and this is what's expected of you. But as long as you've got something in place, then that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And like, sorry, carry on.
Sorry. I was going to say the joys of Zoom there, but I was going to say, but the whole point is, if you're a business owner and you're looking to grow, which you obviously are doing by thinking about employing somebody, actually you will need these in place at some point down the line. So why not start off with them at the start?
that's how I feel about it. You know, a lot of business owners, when they set up on their own, the first thing they think is, I need an accountant because I know my accounts are really important, my finances are really important, and also I have to report to the government. Well, HR is just as important. So you should be thinking from before you start to employ someone, what do I need to have in place? Because a lot of the policies and procedures do not change. They stay the same. And it's only when the government change things through legislative changes or changes come through tribunal outcomes that things change. So you could write a handbook and it could be fit for purpose for 4 to 5 years, with the exception of statutory changes. So that investment in time and information up front could take you right through until you've got 20, 25 employees.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And I suppose the other thing that, you know, we always have this discussion, obviously, about outsourcing, about employing, etc. And one of the things that always comes up is about conflict or dismissal. So when you outsource something to somebody, say for a virtual assistant, for example, it's very easy to end contract, you know. And is it, but where we employ people, we think that it's very difficult to end contract. Is it difficult to end contract, or is that just one of those myths that's out there?
It's a myth. It's a myth. It's never difficult to dismiss anybody, but we shouldn't be quick to rush to it either. I've always said in all of my career that if I get to a disciplinary or a grievance is raised, then as a business we've done something wrong along the way. So if I'm having a discussion with someone through a disciplinary process for performance management, performance issues, 9 times out of 10 as a business I could have worked with that individual to get them to perform into the level I need them to perform. Obviously, from a gross misconduct perspective, if someone's stolen something, had a fight, discriminated against somebody, you can't do anything about that. That's out of your control. But I would say from all the cases that I deal with, 9 times out of 10, we could have done a lot of positive things to prevent a disciplinary or a dismissal taking place. But there is a statutory process for dismissal. So as long as you follow a fair procedure, you will obviously, the liability after that is lower than it would be if you didn't follow a sound process. We can't ever stop people getting to tribunal, but we can manage how we deal with things internally.
Yeah. And I suppose in a way, Jo, it goes back to, you know, what we're talking about, the values and the culture of the organisation, because it goes back to that recruitment aspect, isn't it? So it's employing somebody that, you know, is the right fit. It's the right kind
Absolutely. And that you've given thought to what you want them to do before they get to you. So it's not necessarily writing a 5-page job description. It's about defining what you want that person to do, but also what do you want that person to look and feel like in terms of their experience. And then when they join you, you set the expectation of, okay, I'm going to train you, I'm going to onboard you properly, because if you don't onboard people properly, 9 times out of 10 they would probably not make the probation period, or they would leave you. And recruitment is so expensive, and the recruitment market at the moment is so tough for employers. The way that you handle those situations will really dictate how successful you are in your recruitment. But again, if you haven't defined, this is what I expect of you, this is what your job is, this is what good performance looks like to me, how could you then apply a consequence to someone for that?
No, it's managing expectations, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not fair. It's not fair if you don't tell them what your expectations are. Then how can they live up to them, or how can they, like, say it's not for me, or how can they make a decision moving forward that actually, you know, it is key. But it is scary for a business owner.
It's really scary. It is really scary. And I would say that if you've never done it before, you really need to get advice and someone to kind of handhold you all through the process, because it is a scary process. It's not particularly a lengthy process, but when people don't get the right advice, that's where, you know, things can happen that can cause issues moving further on when that person's left. You know, that's sort of where the tribunal claims come in and things. But, you know, I always say to people, just pick up the phone, don't do anything, just pick up the phone. And 9 times out of 10, you can talk to someone and really understand what it is they're trying to achieve, and give them, I suppose, a plan of how to get there. You know, we do handhold people when they need to. And I don't mean like in a child adult sense. I just mean step by step, kind of like this is the checklist of steps that you've got to take, and just tick them off as you go. And as long as you do that, then you're absolutely going to be fine. You know, and really thinking about why you're dismissing is the most important thing. But I encourage people to put probation periods in place for new starters, and do reviews during the probation period, because there's nothing worse than putting someone on a 6-month probation period and then after 6 months go, oh no, it's not worked out. But you haven't actually spoken to the person about that during the time, and you've given them the impression that they're wonderful, and then at the end of the 6 months you're like, no, it's not worked out. I mean, that's just really not fair.
I was going to say, it's about being fair to people, isn't it? It's about you know, having those open forms of communication. Actually, you're not living up to the expectation, or you're not doing this, etc. But kind of not a blame kind of culture. It's about what can we do to move this forward, isn't it?
Yeah, ultimately you made the decision to recruit that person, so you want them to succeed. So as a manager and a business owner, you have to say to yourself, how can I help that person succeed, and how much responsibility does that person have themselves to succeed? And fairness is huge in employment, but obviously we've got legislation for ensuring the fairness of some groups of people. But everybody should be treated that way. And the other thing is, it's not about treating everybody the same. You know, it's a common myth. Something I talk about when I do equality training, and people look at me like I'm bonkers. Because, you know, my parents told me I had to treat everybody the same. Don't treat anyone differently and you'll be fine. But obviously, in today's society, the legislation around equality means I can't treat everybody the same. I have to treat people how they need to be treated for that person. So by treating everyone the same, you can fall foul of discrimination laws. But if you treat that person as an individual, what are their needs? What do they need? What support do they need? You'll get the best out of that person.
Yeah, I love that, because we always talk about communication, and it's about communicating. People always think that, you know, that golden rule of communication is you treat people or you communicate with people how you need to be communicated with. So you think, well, actually, bubbly and happy, then everybody should be bubbly and happy, and I should talk to them in this way. But actually, some people need a different form of communication. They need to be direct to the point. Other people need detail. Other people need other aspects of it. And it's actually recognizing how others need to be treated. And maybe adapting your style to encompass theirs, you know, and you'll get more out of them. And I think that's really
important. Absolutely agree. And I think, you know, how people take in information is really important to understand. But I don't necessarily feel that managers or business owners have the right training to be able to do that for themselves. Everyone does take, you know, information differently, and you know, I'm a reflector, so you could talk to me today, I might not be able to take that information in, but tomorrow it will mean more to me. And once you understand that, you stop like sending blanket emails to your staff and expect them all to understand it to the same degree. You realize that somebody might need you to have a conversation with them, not just an email, and others will have more questions when they actually start to do that activity. I think managers where they think that everyone is the same is lazy management, really.
It's fascinating, because like we always say, you know, you always think that, you know, business owners are leaders, aren't they? They're the ones that want to be at the front. They want to be, you know, but being a good leader doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good manager. And this is where
they're two different things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I suppose this is where the HR aspect and the kind of and everything comes into it. Because, you know, so I suppose my next question would be, at what stage should you think about, you know, employing, not employing or is it from the start, Jo? Is it when you're first starting to kind of, you're like, you know, is it?
My head will fall off in a second.
You are that Nordic person.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, of course, everyone's got to phone me and Schofield HR because we're wonderful. But what I will say is that the minute that you think that you are going to recruit someone, or the minute that you think you want your business to grow, it's really important to plan for that. And we work very closely with startups, particularly who have perhaps not had any kind of resource management before, or haven't been able to kind of put plans in to recruit people at certain times. And we work with them at the early stage we can ensure the compliance bit's done, but we work with them at the early stage so they can put the right plans in place moving forward. And they, have they ever done an interview before? Do they know the things they should and shouldn't say in an interview? Do they know what notes they should and shouldn't be taking? And doodling is no longer acceptable in interviews, and hadn't been for quite a while, just in case anyone was wondering. So, and if you don't, but you only know what you know, so you might think, oh, I'm really good with people, and I hear this a lot. I'm really good with people, and my gut will tell me if I'm recruiting the right person. Well, the gut doesn't have any legal entity in employment law. So while your gut might tell you that you've got a rapport with that person, it's not necessarily going to tell you if that person can do the job or not. So it's really important to even think about, what information do I need to get from Jo in order to understand if she can do the job now and also can grow with that job.
Yeah.
And so I prefer to work with people really early on, so that I can give that information to them so they can plan the first one, and then they're flying after that.
Yeah, I love it. I have never really thought about the gut aspect, but a lot of people do actually employ on gut and instinct and that kind of thing. But
you can't,
like you say,
in a tribunal.
But actually it makes more sense when you say it, actually, well, why would you? Yes, there is that rapport, and it's very important to have that relationship with employees, but actually, can they actually do the job? Do they have the right attitude? Do they have that kind of mindset for
and this is where the smaller businesses or family run businesses run into trouble, because they go, oh, Jo's been a family friend for 10 years. I get on really well. She's going to be a great employee, so I'm just going to bring her on board. Well, being a family friend versus being an employee is two different things. And as an employee, I still have the same rights, even if I am a family friend. So I always try to encourage people not to go down that route, to take the easy option because they've known people for a long time, because it doesn't always give you the most positive of results.
Yeah. You could lose your family friend at the end of the day if you're not handling it correctly.
The ramifications are hard, aren't they? It's a bigger impact, and I'm always quite wary about that, really.
Yeah. So obviously HR is constantly changing. I mean, you've said that obviously legislative changes and stuff, and I know that COVID had a massive impact on the HR industry.
we all learned a new term. I didn't even know furlough before COVID.
To be fair, nor did I. To be fair, I don't think a lot of people did. But obviously, you've got that kind of, you're learning constantly as well. So if you could predict the next 12 months, say, for example, where HR and the issues or the challenges that people may face, what would you be saying? What would you be telling us?
I think there's quite a few areas. I think the landscape of our employment law is going to change a lot over the next couple of years. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. But firstly, I think, the hybrid working situation. So when COVID happened, the need for people to continue working in a lot of cases, but working from home kind of like catapulted us, I think, as a country 5 years into the future. So it was a bit of a shock to everybody. And I think there's a lot of businesses, depending on the industry, there's a lot of businesses that can see the value in hybrid working. But I also think what's happening in some of the industries, and I'm certainly seeing this with some of my clients, is because managers have never been taught to manage people remotely, they're finding it very difficult to manage people remotely. And also there's a loss of learning in the working environment because people are working remotely. So I know from a HR point of view, when I've been employed and I've worked in teams of people, you have someone to bounce ideas off. Someone might be dealing with a particular case you've not dealt with before. So you've got like on the job learning all the time. But with people working hybridly or working remotely, you lose that skill. You lose that ability to do on the job learning. And I think businesses are now kind of saying, okay, hybrid working is something that we do have to do, but I think we have to have people more in the office than not. And I think I said to you earlier, I'm encouraging people, employers, to think about now, especially with the cost of living, because whilst I appreciate that there's a cost of I would pay for my employer to pay for my gas and electric every day. People will be in that situation rather than having to cover that extra cost myself. So I think that hybrid working model is going to change generally. Outside of that, obviously we had Brexit before COVID. Who remembers Brexit? Because COVID overtook us all, didn't it?
It did.
But we had Brexit before that, and the law at the time was that we would take all of the employment law from Europe that's been given to us as a country, and bang it back onto our statutory books in terms of we'll accept it for now and we'll continue down the route with everything that's been set. But we've already started to have rumblings of changes that the government want to make to law that was set down by the EU. Things like the working time regulations, for instance. So working time regulations does what it says on the tin. It sets the working time regulations for people in their employment, and we're governed by the 48-hour rule in that people shouldn't work more than 48 hours unless they've opted out of the working time regulations. But the government have already indicated that they're going to be reviewing the working time directive as one of the first legislative pieces and overhauling it. We don't know any of the details yet. I don't think they're going to remove that 48 hours necessarily, but I don't know. But it would be good to, when the information starts to trickle through, to be clearer on that, because it does underpin everything. The working time regulations set people's annual leave entitlements, not just their working time, and annual leave is a big issue and concern at the moment because of changes that have come through as a result of a tribunal claim. Okay. So legislation comes through government, and that tells us statutory how things change. But as a HR person, I also have to stay up to date on outcomes of tribunals, because sometimes outcomes of tribunals can influence practices. So there was a case, I think it was Harper Trust versus Bazal, or Bazal, I think is how you say it. And it was around an atypical worker and what holiday entitlement they were supposed to receive. And the outcome of that case has now changed the way HR people and businesses apply holiday to atypical workers, so workers or permanent staff that might work part of a year.
Interesting.
People would say, common sense would be, if someone works part of a year, they would only get part of an annual leave entitlement. But that case changed the approach, in that anybody, say, for instance, that was a term time worker, so didn't work all year, but they were a term time worker. That case has now dictated that person should still get access to the 5.6 weeks holiday entitlement that you would get as a full-time employee.
Oh wow!
That didn't work for term time. That's not to say that the way we calculate part-time holidays has changed for permanent employees, but it has meant that we've now had to look at how we've calculated holiday for someone who's perhaps on a 0 hours contract, on a variable contract, a casual contract, or a term time contract. So things like that happen, and the HR will go, "Oh my God, what does that mean? What does that mean? What do I have to do?" So things like that happen all the time for us. And if you don't read as much as we read in the HR world, and you don't really understand employment law, you're going to miss things like that. And that's how you fall foul of the law. So having an expert that you've outsourced to, or someone that you can go to, an external body who does all that for you, they will tell you what you need to do, and they will tell you what policies you need to change and how you need to communicate it.
I was going to say, it's that, isn't it? Because like, you're sat there telling me that, and I'm like, really? When did when did that happen? Oh, I didn't know that. And again, it goes back to that. If we were employing somebody and we were employing that, it has a massive impact, because if they're know of it, then actually you're doing something that's potentially a challenge, isn't it?
Absolutely. And not every organisation uses those type of contracts, but schools use term time contracts. Hospitality industry use 0 hour contracts a lot. And 0 hours contracts are one of the things that the government have for years been saying that they want to remove the use of them to protect employees a little bit more. So I think that's an area that may come up in the next 12 months. I won't go into too much detail about the IR35 regulations because I've spent years trying to understand them. But the government have said also that they're looking to repeal the IR35 regulation. So IR35 is around taxation for consultants and contractors. And I still remember when it was brought in. Don't ask me the date because my memory's not that great. But I still remember I was working at Severn Trent at the time and we had quite a lot of IT contractors and it was really aimed at the IT market. And it was brought in to control how the contractors informed the HMRC of their tax, really. So it was to govern PAYE and national insurance. And then there was a second release of it, which I think 2 or 3 years ago. You'll have to forgive me because my memory's not great about the dates, but the next part of IR35 came in. But now the government are saying they're looking to repeal the IR35 regulation. So contractors and consultants that work with businesses will be able to deem for themselves what their tax situation is. So I'll give you a practical example because it might help. So as a HR consultant, if I came into your business and I was self-employed, you would need to determine whether you should tax me on my earnings at source through your payroll. Even if I was a limited company, because as a business, you would need to evaluate what your liability is from a tax perspective. So IR35 requires you to do that. But so if they remove it completely without replacing it with anything, what will happen is you could still bring me on board to do a piece of work for you, but you wouldn't have an influence on my tax position. I would have to determine that for myself.
Wow. Interesting.
So yeah, so I'm sure this piece of grey hair here started when IR35 started all that time ago, and it's just got worse and worse. And now they're telling me they're going to take it away, but they're not going to do anything about my grey, Julie.
How dare they not? How dare they not? But it's fascinating because it's an ever-evolving kind of industry, isn't it? You know, employment.
That's what I love about HR. It doesn't stand still ever. And just when you think you've cracked something and you really understand legislation, that employment law and HR are things that sit together. But as a HR consultant, I don't need to know the law inside out. I'm very lucky because I am part of an employment law practice, so I can speak to them if there's something from a legality perspective that I'm not quite sure of. But they go hand in hand. And as business owners, people don't have time to know all of that stuff. They don't have time to read. They don't have time to stay up to date with tribunals that go through and the outcomes of those. And, you know, it's a huge, huge thing. But that's what I love about HR. It doesn't stand still. You know, it changes all the time. And a lot of times at the moment it's very employee focused. The protection is for employees, which is really, really important. But as a business owner, you need to know that. You need to understand all of that. But not in a scary way. HR is not scary.
It is. No, I was going to say, but if you're protecting the employees, then in a way you're protecting yourself as well as a business owner.
Yeah.
Because, you know, because you may sit around and think, well, actually, it's all employee focused, but I'm the business owner. I'm the one that's paying. I'm the one that's wanting that job done. I'm the one, you know, that's up for it, a tribunal or whatever, you know, grievance, what, you know, if it all goes wrong, it's my name kind of thing.
Well,
so what is the employer even?
Well, do you know, it does have a massive impact because, you know, your reputation is always on, you know, under the spotlight from an employee's perspective when they're looking at employers. But I think, you know, I always say, I know that sometimes managers will look at a HR process and go, oh, have I really got to do all of that? And I'm like, yeah, you do. You really do. And the reason that they have to do it is because that's their bit of security. You know, taking someone through a disciplinary, for instance, and making sure that you've written to them. So you've told them what the allegations are, that you've given them all of the evidence that you have gathered, that you hold a meeting with them to discuss that. And then there's an outcome. All of that comes with letters, notes, administrative documents that form the protection for the business to prove they've treated that person properly and that they followed legislation, but also treated that person with dignity and respect and won't fall foul of any other pieces of legislation. So that's how businesses can protect themselves. It's not looking at it and saying, oh God, it's an admin. It's just admin biased. It's admin focused. It's all of those hoops I've got to jump through. It doesn't have to be that painful. It really doesn't. But some of it is necessary because that's your protection as a business owner.
Yeah. And it is so true, because you can get yourself in insecurity. I mean, we were giggling beforehand before coming live on the call about just asking Google, like, what's the employee's rights? Well, I'll just Google, and it comes apparent when you're sat talking to you that actually, although Google is the fountain of all knowledge, they're not the fountain of all knowledge. You wouldn't ask Google for half of this, would you?
No, and the other thing is not to ask your friends who might have businesses that someone else might have written a contract for, because that contract, I might have done. That contract is for that business. So whilst the statutory elements of it may be or may not be correct, but you're not an expert in HR, so you don't necessarily know that. The customs and practice won't be for your business. And how, as a business owner, do you know that you're not writing something that you think is common sense, which actually is a breach of law?
Yeah, good point.
Because you only know what you know. And I wouldn't profess, although he'd probably disagree with me, to tell my husband how to do his job as an accountant. And so, I wouldn't tell a business owner how to run his business. I would just tell him the elements of employing people that I know are critical and important for him. And he should want to buy me as an expert because he doesn't have that information. So, as a business owner, whether you're just starting off or you're 5 or 10 years old, you should buy in knowledge, not claim to have all the knowledge yourself.
I totally agree. Absolutely, because if you had the knowledge, you'd be running a HR firm, wouldn't you? You'd be running a HR practice, wouldn't you? Because you'd have all that knowledge. And it's the same, you hit the nail on the head right at the very beginning. Actually, the first employed an accountant. Well, why do you employ an accountant? Well, because they've got that knowledge. So it's the same with HR. It's the same with marketing services, or it's the same with everything. A lot of people go into business because they are good at their craft. They're good at they're doing their do, if you know what I mean. They're good at that element. And you can't be a master of all of the things that go with it. So you can't necessarily master the accountants. You can't necessarily master the HR and the recruitment aspect. So that's where you employ specialists and people that know what they're talking about. And it's clear today, Joe, that you definitely know what you're talking about.
Thank you. But I was the same when I started my business. I didn't have to recruit someone in HR, thankfully, but I did think I need an accountant because I'm really bad with numbers. Letters, I'm okay with, words is fine. But numbers, I have no clue about. I am still married to an accountant, so it was fine from a bookkeeping perspective. But I thought, well, I can't do marketing. I can't do SEO. I can't do accounting. So where am I going to go? Because all of those things are really important to grow my business. HR is the same. And HR should be like your number 2 thought after your accountant, in my view.
Yeah. No, I love it. So I think that is the perfect place to kind of stop today, to be fair, Joe. Mark's been online. He's been saying how great
I know, bless him. I said, he told me he was going to watch, and he's so kind. He's so kind.
He's so kind. Glenn's also been on there. Steve's been on there. There's been comments saying hello, great site, brilliant tips, hints, and I personally totally agree with you. I think it's about the HR being that second kind of I was going to say the second emergency service into your business.
That's how I've described it in the past, and I thought I was being too bold.
No, but it's so true, because people are so important, but it's about protecting yourself as the business. And I think that's fundamentally what the kind of the mindset shift needs to kind of be for a business owner. It's not an added expense. It's not it's not a wish. It's not on a wish list. It's not a desire. It's an essential rather than
the thing is, Julie, it's like I heard a saying from someone within our little networking area saying, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. Well, if you think buying HR services is expensive, try going to tribunal and defending yourself.
Yeah. No, and it's so true. It's so true. And I think, you know, we can cross our fingers, you know, and hope that we'll never get there. But actually, what happens if we do? You know,
I've only been to tribunal 3 times in the whole of my career.
Oh, wow. 3 times.
And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you should be. You should be. It's an amazing experience to do it, though, surely, as well.
Yeah, it's a bit scary sometimes, but yeah, it's a good experience. It's great for learning for HR people, but you know, I pride myself on making sure that we don't get there.
It's like you say, it's about the performance management. It's about that kind of that probation period. It's about having those open forms of communication with employees prior to it becoming a problem, becoming an issue. You know, and having those in place, and that process, that procedure, is so key. You wouldn't have a ladder and nobody hold it at the bottom, would you? You wouldn't cross your fingers for health and safety. You wouldn't cross your fingers for a lot of things. And why would you do it for HR?
Absolutely, yeah. I like the ladder analogy. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, feel free. I'll put that on as a Billy bonus. On as Billy bonus. So for all those people that are out there listening and watching, obviously we will put Jo's details in the comment boxes below. So please do reach out. She is lovely, obviously, but the knowledge and the expertise that she has are just astounding, because you do know what you're talking about, and I think that in itself has come across today. But one thing that I love about working with you is that you have got this constant need for learning and for development for yourself, and that knowledge you're so to absorb it so that you can pass it on to your kind of clients, and to make sure that they are compliant and make sure that they are doing what they should be doing, because like we've both said, it protects the business owner as well as the employee, and that is the sort of environment that you want to work in, that you want to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, as I said, I love HR, so learning about it all the time is interesting to me, as crazy as that might sound to a lot of people. But learning, you know, and that continual information and doing different things and refreshing myself, it's really important to the service that we give.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that are looking for policies, contracts, handbooks, or just a general kind of, am I doing this right, you need to contact Jo at Schofield HR, and she will do her best to do no nonsense kind of conversations. It's to the point, educate people, the business owners out there. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jo. I have absolutely loved it.
Thank you for inviting me.
My absolute pleasure. I know that people will have got a lot from the comments that we've got on all platforms, have got value out of that, and that was what our aim was today, to make HR a less scary subject. So get employing those maybe tough out there, but think about your values, think about your culture, and think about the people that you want to work with. So thank you very much.
Take care. Thanks ever so much, Julie.
Thank you.